Hi everybody, Brent Schlenker, Chief Learning Officer for Litmus.com and your U.S. correspondent for Learning Now TV. We're going to take it back 5 decades. What was it like? What was e-learning like throughout the decades? Let's start back in the 70s. Okay, so not all of you in the industry even remember the 70s. It was a time of disco, lava lamps, bell bottoms, Led Zeppelin, Farrah Fawcett hair, big hair. And for technology, it was a time of mainframe computers. Yes, the personal computer did start to have its birth in the 70s, but as far as mainstream or as mainstream as computing could get, really the big game in town, especially in the enterprise in corporate America at the time, was the big mainframe computer. And with that was a fantastic solution called Plato. Plato, that stood for programmed logic for automated teaching operations. It's a lot to say, so I'm glad they just call it Plato. So many modern concepts in multi-user computing were started with the Plato system. Systems like instant messaging, email, all of the social media you know today really kind of got its start with Plato. So I don't know what you were doing in the 70s, but the mainframe was really an important part of my life, not because of computing, but when we were kids, we used to draw on the punch cards my dad used to bring home. You guys remember punch cards, right? As we move into the 80s are the time of the personal computer, the real time of the personal computer. Of course, they may have gotten their start back in the 70s, but in the 80s, that's when everything got real. The 80s were a time of acid wash jeans, and if the 70s were big hair for women, the 80s was the time of big hair for men. And I think the 80s was really when computer-based training really started to pick up and take off. Back in the 70s with Plato, they used terms like computer-aided instruction, but computer-based training, what we know as CBT, really started to take off in the 80s. So while we see the 80s as a time of the personal computer, really at the time, only 8.2% of family households had a personal computer in the home. But by the end of the decade, there was at least 15% of the homes with a personal computer. And 97% of schools had personal computers. And welcome to the 90s. What can we say about the 1990s? It was flannel shirts, grunge music, O.J. Simpson, the Rachel hairstyle, Sony PlayStation, and of course, the World Wide Web. This is also the decade where we began to transition from CBT, computer-based training, to WBT, web-based training. Of course, WBT didn't last too long because right around the corner, we just started calling it e-learning. Does anybody remember CD-ROMs? Yeah, those were big, but that was a big deal back then. When you could take a training course and put it on a CD-ROM and mail it around the world, instead of having to ship corporate trainers around the world or send those who needed to be trained to training locations, that was a big deal and there was massive cost savings. And with that cost savings came a lot of interest in corporate training. As a side note, I reached out online on Twitter and asked about the 90s. If anybody remembered in a few words what the 90s meant to them for our industry. And my friend Mark Aylett responded with one word: proprietary. And as the market for corporate training began to grow, and grow fast, that's when proprietary was not a good thing. And so the government got a bunch of really smart folks together and decided we should come up with a standard. And hence, SCORM was born. So the 70s gave us mainframes, Plato, and the 80s gave us personal computers, CBTs, and the 90s gave us web-based training and proprietary content. So that brings us up to the 2000s. The zeros, the O's, and in the 2000s, that's when it got interesting. That's when everybody got the ability to put content online in very simple and easy ways. This in part was due to the cloud, the software as a service, multiple browser-based platforms, social media, blogging got really big, Informal learning then became a very hot topic, as well as every other buzzword you can possibly think of was most likely born in the 2000s. The 2010s were, and are, a time of hipsters, Mad Men, Game of Thrones, and streaming media, virtual reality, all of the different technologies that we talk about today. Mobile devices definitely got started in the 2000s, but mobile learning really didn't come on strong, and mobile first development didn't really come on strong until the 2010s. So where does that leave us today? There has been a lot of technology used in the classroom, but the most important thing is where we're at today and where we're going into the future. And again, my name is Brent Schlenker. I'm the Chief Learning Officer for Litmus.com. Hope you enjoyed this. I'll see you next month.